Now coming to tonight's session, I'm very excited and happy to welcome Mr. Sai Satish Vedam, the moderator of this session. Mr. Vedam is the Chief Product Officer, Senior Faculty and Executive Coach at the Institute of Product Leadership. He was most recently the Senior Director of Product Management at Oracle. Great to have you here, Mr. Vedam. Handing the session over to you.
Thank you, Shama. Again, good evening, folks. For those of you who continue with us from session one, good to have you. And for those of you who are joining for this session, welcome again. And we're going to have the past session, the last session that we had was pretty, insightful. I think some great analogies for us to remember. And the next session is promising to be equally interesting. So before I get started, just a quick housekeeping. Folks, if you have questions, and please ask questions if you're on Zoom, ask it on the Q&A box window, not on the chat window. There's a lot of chatter on the chat, so it's hard to find your questions. If you ask it in Q&A, the team can pull that together. If you are listening and joining this from LinkedIn Live and YouTube and Facebook, Twitter and Facebook, please ask those questions in that thread, and we'll do our best to bring those questions to do it. So with that, it gives me great pleasure in inviting Mr. Satyajeet Salgar to this session. Satyajeet, if you are on, please turn on your video and say hello so that we know we can see you.
Hopefully you can see me?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much. Right. Great. Hello and welcome. So for a quick introduction about Satyajeet, he is a group product manager at Google, currently managing and leading products in the events and media vertical, and delight on Google search. Now that's intriguing. So maybe I'll come back to that in a minute, Satyajeet, to understand what that is. Prior to that, Satyajeet led product management functions in YouTube, especially YouTube payments, ads, and games. Satyajeet holds an engineering degree from University of Pune, a master's from Stanford, and MBA from Chicago Booth School. Thank you for joining, Satyajeet. Welcome to the session. So, before we get started, I thought we will, understand who our audience is, right? So do a little bit of polling to see where they come from, what their backgrounds are, and especially, any activities that they are involved in, product strategy or product management. So we'll just take a few moments here to launch the poll. So we could go with the first one just to understand where the folks are coming from, right? So for folks who join in the first session, don't worry, these are different questions. So do go ahead and look at this and start voting for them. Of course, the questions are, phrased in such a way that you will actually have to read all of these things, not just click on what the first one is. First one, of course, is, there are a lot of questions about people who want to move into, product management and strategy, especially around technical understanding, technology background, and all of that. So I wanted to understand how many of the folks here joining actually are from that or not from that, right? Mostly. So yes, I think, go on, folks. There are many of you. Take that time to vote. Let's bring up the next one and see. These are interesting insights actually about the audience. And Satyajeet, maybe some of these things can help you put a spotlight on some of the aspects that you're going to cover, or even de-emphasize things that you think may not be relevant. So let's move to the next one. Okay, this is about your role right now. Are you a C-level executive right now joining us? Are you head of product management with titles? Now, titles are kind of fancy. There are very interesting titles, especially in India, that are the creative titles, but go by the responsibilities as opposed to the title. Unsurprisingly, majority of the folks seems to be coming from product management responsibilities, which is good for the conversation. And other folks, please don't hesitate, ask your questions, relevant to the topic, relevant to the theme of this edition, right, which is essentially strategy. Great. So Let's go to the next one. So Satyajit, you are seeing the results, I suppose, right? So you are actually getting that. Yeah, good. Great. Now, I think specifically around the most of the responsibilities in product roles around planning, right? Product planning. Where do you spend most of your time? All right. Again, based on current reality, not aspirationally, right? All of us would love to do other things than what we are doing, but let's give that a real information here. Clearly, release planning, requirements, definition, prioritization, all of these inbound product management activities, right? So, which is again good to know from the audience. So the last one, I think, before we get you started on this, Satyajit, is let's bring up the last one. Okay, it's a wish list now. The previous one was based on current reality, and this one is if you want to get to where you want to get to, what are the most important skills that you believe you would need to get there, right? So now, make no mistake, all these skills are very important to get into product management or strategy, but this is your personal wish list, as opposed to somebody telling you what you should get. Awesome. Give another 20 seconds, 10 seconds. There 57 voted. Folks, all it takes is just look at that and tick it. Super. Okay. Thank you again for telling us who you are in a way without telling us who you are, especially for this session. So now to that intriguing question that at least I have, Satyajit. Delight on search. Now, does Easter eggs come under one of those?
It does. So Easter eggs, doodles, sort of things that we sprinkle along the search page are part of that.
Super, portfolio. Because I think yesterday my kid, he brought up this topic about the ship that got stuck in the Suez Canal, right? And then I asked him, okay, you know what? Take 20 minutes, read what you can read about it, know what you can know about it, and come and talk to me about, let's understand this. So he actually went to Google and typed Suez Canal, and he saw some ships moving on that. So he showed me that, and I was wondering, wow, what is the team that must be doing this? So now I'm talking to the person who's leading that team. This is awesome.
Yes, that was a fun one. The person who did it, essentially came up with the idea in the morning, and we had it live in like a few hours.
Wow.
So that was a fun one to get done. Right? Everyone was like, "Oh, you must have planned for so long for it." You're overestimating how much we thought about it.
Super, awesome. Over to you. Thanks for that. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. First of all, thank you for the invitation, and I'm really excited to be here. Hopefully, I'm going to try using. Hopefully, you can see the slides, and they all.
We can. You're using app, and that's awesome.
Which I've used it just a couple of times. So let's see how it goes.
Yeah. We had by the way, we had Phil Libin. Last session, last edition.
Yeah. No. So let me actually before I start the presentation, let me to warm people up. Let me actually I have a Mentimeter going as well. So hopefully, oops. If you can use the code, so go to menti.com and use this code over here.
So the text is, sorry to interrupt. The text is not clear. So I don't know if you can make it full screen or even read out that text. That would be helpful.
Let me, for some reason, let me try that again.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right. So let's see if some of you are able to get to it.
On this screen, we can't see the code. At least I'm not able to.
All right, let me keep the code up a little longer. So I'll give folks a few minutes to go to menti.com and try this out. I promise this question is a warm up, but it gets more fun a little bit later. Oh, there we go. All right. I like the honesty of people said they'll decide how they feel based on how the presentation goes. Thank you for that. All right, what's going on? Cool. Well, thanks everyone. So I want all of you to start with an exercise, which is I want all of you to type in either a company or a product that you think does strategy really well. Like you think, okay, this is a company whose strategy I understand, that makes sense, and this is why they win. Or it can be a product that you think from a company that this I totally get, they've completely nailed what they're doing. If you take a couple of seconds and type that in, that would be great. Because I'd love to sort of see and we can hopefully in the Q&A and then through the presentation talk about the product or the company. SpaceX. Oh yeah, I saw someone talk about Domino's yesterday. Tesla, I have a Tesla example in there. I'm glad someone picked Google. Netflix, Disney. Cool. All right, I see a few more. Cool. All right. So I want to get a sense from people or what are the kinds of companies. So Amazon's a great one. I think Amazon's a company that I really admire. They sort of have it's one of the few places where I think they've consistently turned every cost item into a revenue item on their balance sheet, which is really remarkable. All right, cool. Thanks for everyone for participating. So with that, let me get started on my presentation. I'll jump back to a few polls from time to time. So keep that page up. First of all, I'll say a little bit about myself. I've been working in product management for well over a decade now, a decade and a half. I've been lucky enough to work on a few products that have had over 1 billion monthly active users, and I've had a chance to think about what works and what doesn't. And so I've had to reflect on product strategy quite a bit. I've had a chance to work with people that I think are really, really good at that. And a chance to read a few books and read things from a lot of them have published. And everything that I talk about today are some of the ideas are mine, but most of the ideas are referenced from these people, and I'll link to them as I go through it. So I like to tell you what I'm going to tell you before I actually tell that thing to you. So here's what I'm going to say. I'll go over 10 tips because I think strategy is really hard. It is part art, part science. There isn't a template that you can generally use everywhere. But I think it is something that with practice, with discipline, if you know what things you need to look at, can be done really, really well. But there are 3 things I'll start with. And at the end of this, if you leave with anything, I hope this is what you leave with. The first is that there is far more bad strategy than there is good strategy. And I'll talk a little bit about why. Good strategy is actually really simple once it's done, but it's really, really hard to get to. I'll talk about 3 frameworks that I think are good questions to ask yourself about, is this strategy good? Is this working? Do I believe it? And then finally, I'll talk a little bit about metrics and execution and how you keep your strategy on track once you get there. But I think these are the pieces you need in order to get your strategy in place. So there's always the question of why strategy matters, right? Like I think all of you sort of spent. I saw where you spend your time and what you want to develop. But I think in general, what is core to you, core to product management or any sort of product leader, is your product strategy. I think product management is an amazing job for many, many reasons. But I think that one of the most interesting parts, and sometimes the hardest part, is actually defining your product strategy and figuring out how to take your product forward. So I'll go through 10 tips really quickly. And I'll try and leave time at the end for Q&A. So with that, before you have good strategy, I think it's really, really important to recognize when you have bad strategy. And what I've generally found is that there is much, much, much more bad strategy than there is good strategy. And sometimes there are very good reasons for this. The most common reason is people mistake like a vision statement or a wish list with a strategy far too often. I've actually seen strategy documents that go something like, our strategy is to be the best product in the market, or our strategy is to maximize revenue. So I wrote this down because I want to see this example. This is an actual example from Kmart from a while ago, where the actual strategy, their actual strategy statement said, we will thrive as a mass merchandising company that offers customers quality products through a portfolio of exclusive brands and labels. Like, this is, it's an interesting plan, but it is not helpful to anyone. It might inspire them, but like it does not help you make any decisions. And it's essentially a wish list. It's also not distinguishing, right? Like any store in the world can put that same statement and it will be true. So half the time, I think the problem is people don't know what they actually want with their strategy. Now, there are times, by the way, that, so there are obviously these times where people mistake what a strategy is. But there are times when people actually know what a strategy statement is, but they still get to a bad strategy. And these are the things that are particularly sort of hard. But there are very good reasons why this happened, right? So Shreyas Doshi has this great Twitter thread, and if you're in product management, I recommend following him on Twitter, where he talks about why smart people and smart companies still do very suboptimal things, and he walks through some of these. But let me ask all of you actually. So let's go to the next. Let's go to the next Menti question. Has any of these things ever formed the basis of what you thought of your strategy? Which is, we've done this before. A customer has asked for this. A competitor did this. It's what you think will get approved internally. Has any of these things been a cornerstone of your strategy before? A customer asked for this. That's pretty common. A competitor did this. Yeah. Yep. Customer, competitors. Yeah, we used to have this joke in a while. There's this team that I will not name that, they essentially, whatever plan they had would always take a while to sort of get going. And they would always say, oh, the easiest way to get this approved and move it forward is to wait for a competitor to do it, because that was the only way they could get their executives like on board to actually executing on a plan. But yeah, this is, these are common reasons, right? But unfortunately, these are all terrible reasons to sort of have a strategy. And here's why, right? Which is, there is discomfort in not having a strategy, right? Which is, if you're a product manager, if you're a product leader, if you're a CEO, if you're in leadership at anywhere, it feels imperative that you should have a product strategy, that you need a product direction. And unfortunately, sometimes good strategy takes a while, right? It's not obvious. It doesn't come right away. And so what people do is they jump to get to a plan. And there are all of the things that we talked about or in the poll end up being part of that, right? They ask a customer, they ask maybe 2 or 3 customers, and they ask the question in sort of a leading way, which is, would this be useful to you? Would you buy this? And they come away with a plan. I've often seen this thing where an executive will go into a meeting with a customer or a partner or another team and come back with a plan, and somehow that ends up being a 1 or 2 year roadmap if you're not careful. Teams bias to know what they built, right? Teams bias towards what they've built before, right? So if they built something similar before in one area, there's a natural temptation, which is, oh, look, it worked there. We know how to build this. Let's do it again. And of course, there's competition, right? So which is, you can kind of see someone else doing something and say like, oh, maybe this will work for us too. and everyone tries it. And there's very little penalty for doing that, right? Because it's been successful for someone else. So, I think like every app that I know is using a story right now, using stories right now as part of their engagement strategy. And in some cases it makes sense. In other cases, it's like, in the old days, no one got fired for buying IBM. Now it's like, no one really gets into trouble for copying like, your favorite social media app. So I think it's really, and the reason I go through this is it's important to recognize bad strategy before you have good strategy, right? Which is, it's important to recognize these are the biases I have. This is why we've got to this point. This is why we have the error. Before you get to, okay, how do I get to a good, coherent, successful strategy? All right, with that, once you've recognized each of these sort of points, then let's talk about what are the pieces required to make a good strategy. So I said good product strategy is simple. And I think there are two questions that I really like. So if you're online, and again, interested in product management, I recommend reading Gibson Biddle in particular. He has a great blog where he talks about about product management in general. And one of the first things I read when I started product management was this blog by Adam Nash, where he talks about how to be a great product leader. And I think these two statements, if you believe your product strategy answers these two questions, I think you might have a good product strategy. So the first is, how will your product delight customers in hard to copy, margin enhancing ways? And the second is a much simpler one, which is, what is the game you're playing? Why will you win? And how are you keeping score? So let me walk through some examples, but I think let's, I want to sort of jump back and actually talk about these questions like a little more slowly, right? Which is, Gibson's question is great, which is you literally look at a product problem, look at a feature, look at a strategy that you're coming up with, and ask three questions, right? Which is, the first, will this make customers dramatically happy? Right, I think that's the first thing you ask. The second is this hard to copy? Is this distinguishing in any way? Is there a reason that a bigger competitor won't do exactly the same thing really quickly and out execute you because of some other scale? And the third is this margin enhancing? And the reason margin enhancing is important is it does it grow revenue in some way, or does it save costs, or does it provide some long-term competitive pricing or cost advantage? If you answer these three questions, and I recommend going through Gibson's blog where he goes through how, so he was a product leader at Netflix and then Chegg, and he goes through how, every feature at Netflix, for example, something like personalization, right? They ask this hard question: if we invest in it, will it delight customers enough? Is it hard to copy? Absolutely, because the data they have, the pieces that they have are really hard for anyone else to get. And is it margin enhancing? And in this case, he was like, it was, because as long as people stay more, it will enhance margins. But every single feature, will you do 4K? Will you do interactivity? And he actually decided, like, the reason they decided not to do interactivity was they didn't believe it met this product strategy test. Right. So these are things that you can think about. So I love this question, which is your product, will your product, sort of delight customers in this enhancing way? And the second is much simpler. What is the game you're playing, and how are you keeping score? Right. Like in many ways, that is literally the job of a good product manager, which is you're able to define, what is the game you're playing? Like, why do you think your product strategy or your company will win? And this requires, knowing your customers really well, understanding the segment. It requires understanding your competition. It requires understanding market dynamics. And I think that tells you, like, that basically sort of maps out your entire product strategy. The second part, and I'll go a little bit more into this, is just as important, which is how will you keep score? What are the metrics you care about on a daily basis that let you know, am I winning? Am I losing? Are things going in the right direction? So let me dive into this a little bit more. So I said at the beginning, like good strategy should not be templated, but there are some templates that work. I'm going to go with a high bar, which is a good product strategy. You shouldn't even be afraid of like, and again, not everyone can do this, but a good product strategy can actually be completely public. So Elon Musk has written this. So this is actually from 2006. This is a long time ago. And I think it's a great template. It's about, I think his first strategy document is about two and a half-ish pages, which I think is about the right size, right? So it should be written from the point of view of someone who, understands the space, but it's simple language, so you don't need to know a lot of the details. So it needs to be simple. It needs to be a Word document, or it needs to be text essentially. And you describe all of these things, right? Which is, what is your plan? How will you win? Why will all of this work? And in his case, he wrote the entire document and then literally summarized it in the Tesla master plan in 4 bullet points, which is, we're going to build a sports car. We're going to use that money to build an affordable car, use that money to build an even more affordable car. And then as a result, provide zero emission electric power options. That was it. That was the plan, right? And then, I think a good plan carries over. So he updated it in 2016, where sort of, said, okay, we're going to be even more ambitious. And this includes their plans for solar roofs and all of that stuff. And I think, once you kind of see it's an arc of 10 years, but that is the vision, and that sort of is the execution they're going for, right? And so I think that is, again, this is a high bar, but that should be the sort of aspiration with your strategic plan. It's a document anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5 pages long, that essentially someone who is not an expert in your field, but sort of understands the area on some level, can look at and say, okay, this makes sense. Now I understand why this product is going to be useful, or why this why this sort of company is going to win. So I'm going to go through 2 tools, 2 questions, a few questions that you can ask to get there. And sort of hopefully this will help you sort of frame your strategy as you go through this. So this is, this is the 5 why rule, which is whenever asked with the question, like, ask why a couple of times. In fact, at least 5 times, to convince yourselves that a lot of this works. This is, this comes from, I think like it comes from consulting and sort of operations as a way to think about things. But it particularly holds for product management and product strategy in general. And I have found, especially early on for product managers in their career, this is actually a challenge, because something that, like I've often had people say, oh, it's really important for things to be consistent in this product. And, you ask like, why? And they'll say, oh, because, users will get confused. I was like, okay, why do you think users will get confused? Do you have evidence of that? And they'll say, oh, maybe let me look for it. Right? So in 2 whys, they sort of start questioning something that they really, really believe. And I find that most people it's very easy to fall into this trap, particularly if you've been a domain a long time, you've been in a company a long time, to sort of believe that certain things are just true. And this discipline of like looking at everything and saying like, okay, do I still believe in the size of this market? Do I think this customer will still care about this, right? Like, which is, we'll deliver this to customers and they'll love it. And if you just step back from your idea and say, oh, like, why will they love it? And then you come up with some reason, oh, it's specific to their culture, and like they think about it in this way. You say, okay, but why is it so specific to their culture? And I think at some point, right, you get to this core idea where you convince yourself that your strategy is right, your assumption is right, your dynamic market, or your understanding of market dynamics is correct. But it takes a while, right? Like, and almost everything that you get to, you sort of look at a few times to sort of get there. The slides are hard to read. Let me see if I can make it a little bit bigger. All right, so that's one of the things to look at, right? Ask yourselves these questions. The second thing is there is an art to reframing things. And I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to give you a few examples from YouTube where I used to work. So my boss at the time, Shishir Mehrotra, has gone on to found another company, and he's written this post called IGEN Questions. and it's the art of framing problems, right? So the idea is there is a he's made up the word eigenquestions because eigenvectors are sort of the most discriminating form of a vector in multidimensional space. And so I think the eigenquestion is, what is the perfect question that you can ask that if you ask it will answer all the other questions? So the example he gives, and this was like a very real thing, a few years before, it was I've worked at YouTube twice, so it was a very real thing the first time that I was at YouTube, and by the time I joined the second time, it had been answered. But it was a hard question to answer, which is, if you're on YouTube, should YouTube link to other websites, right? So if there's something that is that like we know that exists on Hulu or Disney or somewhere else, should we link to that, or should we actually just only show you things that are on YouTube? And this was a huge debate within the company, and people talked about it in different ways, talked about implications and all of this stuff. And then at some point, right, like I think people asked that question: should we link out or not? But you needed to step back, right? And at some point, you sort of step back enough and said, oh, actually, the right question is, what is more important to our customers? Is it consistency? Is it, that the experience looks the same, things behave the same way every single time? Or is it comprehensiveness, right? Which is, YouTube is a place where you can play anything in the world. And I think the answer came to, Google, the search engine, is a place where you care about comprehensiveness. You can ask for anything and get answers. Consistency matters less, but YouTube is a place where consistency matters much, much more. And so once you step back and ask this question, like, do we care about consistency or comprehensiveness? All these other things sort of came through, right? Which is, then you say, oh yeah, of course, then you shouldn't link out. You should just have consistent experiences on YouTube. And so again, like I reframing is it's another way of looking at the 5 whys, right? Like just keep asking, like, what is the actual question to ask? Now the advantage of finding the right question is it helps you sort of set a whole bunch of other things. So let me give you some examples. I'm a big believer in a single metric, which is, one thing that a team should do is, and I've had debates with people on my team about this, and it's even some of my VPs and bosses, like, do you really think a single metric is useful? And I actually think it does, because it brings a lot of clarity. So I'm going to actually now jump and ask all of you another question, which is, I'm going to, so one of the most sort of interesting things YouTube did for a while was pick the single metric. So I'm going to ask you, what do you think the single metric for YouTube was? So again, this was a while ago, so I'm going to ask you to jump back. What's important to a company changes, but I'm going to say like about, say 6 years ago. What do you think the single metric is? All right, a lot of people know the answer. That's right. So the metric was watch time. Oh, number of creators, that's a good one. So people are going through a couple of things. So the answer is actually watch time, but it was hugely controversial, right, when we came to it. So YouTube published this blog post about how watch time was a metric. They set this crazy ambitious goal, and it was a goal that was set for 4 years out. And actually, there were calculations that the team made at the time, and they basically said, if we actually meet this watch time goal, we'll have to sort of double the bandwidth of the internet in order for it to be met. So it was that ambitious. But it was the right metric at the time, because the idea was it aligned everything, right? So if you go to views, yes, but then people aren't watching for a long time. We wanted to evolve YouTube to be more like television. We want people to sit and sort of be there for, sort of treat it very much like they treat television. All the other metrics are good metrics, right? Like I should clarify that, right? It's important that creators upload videos. It's important that you have a lot of creators on the site. But if you're going to optimize for a single metric, the decision was, watch time was the right metric at the time. Now, this has a number of sort of nice side effects, right? Which is, if you have this good strategy and a good metric, every prioritization discussion gets solved, right? So when you have that much clarity, right? If anyone on the team, and again, a good strategy carries over to large org, right? So at this point, like imagine 1,000 odd people sort of in engineering and product all thinking about this, right? And if you repeat the strategy enough and everyone gets it, here's the ideal thing that will happen. 4 or 5 levels down, a team that's making a small decision says like, okay, should we do this thing or this other thing? And so they will ask themselves, okay, what are we going to optimize? What is the strategy and what is the metric? And so as you know, people that worked at YouTube, we could just ask ourselves, okay, will this move watch time up or will this hurt watch time? And if it didn't move watch time up significantly, it probably wasn't a project worth doing. And so I think if you have these right questions, if you have the right metric that everyone is optimizing, your strategy runs itself, right? So you can, whenever you're confronted with any single question, you can ask this and the answer will be extremely obvious. And so that's the advantage of having, you know, this single metric and this single sort of coherent strategy, without which sort of, you know, even simple questions will seem harder than they actually are. So Gokul Rajaram has this great post about the second most important metric in every company. And I warn people about this one as well. So I think the example he uses is, at some point, you know, everyone in e-commerce can be obsessed by GMV, and so you focused on GMV. And at some point, like you lose your check metric, right? Which is, so you stop looking at profits, and then suddenly, you know, your GMV is grown, but you're losing money. At YouTube, similarly, right? We focused on watch time, but like we're like, oh, now we've got to focus on other diversity metrics, right? So the example I always give people is, if you optimize purely for watch time, the homepage of YouTube would primarily be gaming videos, right? Because those are longer, people sit for a long time, and sort of that's what you would optimize for. But it doesn't make sense for the homepage, because on the homepage you want to show you want to be broad, right? You want people to know, okay, these are the things that I might have at YouTube. And so there is another metric, right? So you need to think about diversity, you need to think about experience. And so you think about other metrics when you optimize for the homepage. So this is an important concept, right? The idea of the second most important metric that you have to think about controlling your main metric. So people call them control metrics or check metrics. So even I'd say you should spend an inordinate amount of time figuring out the first metric in your for your product strategy, but spend almost the same amount of time thinking about what your control metrics are. How do you know, like, your strategy, if you're executing too well, is actually not hurting you? So I work on Google search right now, and experimentation is, you know, we run, I think the last stat we released was for 2019. And I think we ran, you know, sort of tens of thousands of experiments. Experiments should be part of your strategy, right? Testing the market, A/B tests, of course, but also things like floating something to see, okay, well, does this actually work? Do people care about it? But I think experimentation shouldn't be a crutch, right? So you should only experiment if first you understand what you're trying to learn, right? Which is, it can be part of your strategy, but you know exactly what you're going to do if you get one outcome versus the other. And the second is, I think you need to understand reversible and irreversible decisions. Reversible decisions can be made really, really quickly. And so if it's something that's, you know, relatively easy to roll back, you can, you know, test the feature, see how people like it, roll it out to a few beta customers. And if it's, you know, not working, or like it has unintended side effects, you should be able to roll it back really, really quickly. Irreversible decisions have consequences. And I think those are the ones where you want to spend a lot of time thinking through, okay, is this actually part of my long-term strategy? What implications does it have? What are the knock-on effects? Are there, you know, architectural implications I'm making? And literally as a PM, you think about, are there technical trade-offs? Are there business trade-offs? Are there economic trade-offs? You think about all of those things. And it's okay to spend a long time making that strategic decision. On the other hand, you know, if there is, you know, will people like the color blue or red? Everyone has an opinion and you can pick one, but that is a reversible decision, right? So you can test it out, see what's happening, and go back. The second thing is experimentation should only be like, it should be something that is very driven, right? Which is you should have a clear view of, I am going to try to learn X. And so I'm running this experiment so that I learn this thing. And that when it's very sort of thoughtful and driven, experimentation is a great way to enhance your strategy. On the other hand, if it's, we are going to experiment our way into a product, that generally ends up hurting you and your team. Finally, the last tip, and then I'll try and recap everything quickly, which is always check if you still believe your strategy. The challenge with investing in a strategy and sort of spending a lot of time getting to it, and let's be honest, right? Like for most people at companies, you're not the only person that makes a decision on the strategy. Once you come to it, you convince others, you convince your teams, you convince your executives. So everyone feels bought in. And so there is this natural tendency and desire we all have to like, oh, I have to prove that my strategy is succeeding. I need to push it forward. I need to make sure, like, even if I'm getting data that suggests things might not be working, I'm going to work a little bit harder or like move things around to make it work. And I think we tell product managers to come in every day and stare at a dashboard, right? You have to start your day with a dashboard to see if your metrics make sense. What's the health of your product like? I think on a quarterly basis, it's okay to reset and actually think about, okay, do I still believe everything that led to me writing my strategy, right? Like, has anything changed? Has the market changed? Has competition changed? Is there something different in user behavior? Is something in my metrics or what I'm learning from the market suggesting to me, okay, some assumptions I made earlier are wrong. And it requires a lot of discipline and sort of the ability to separate from your original decisions in order to do this. But I think it's essential. Without it, I think like good product managers are able to sort of say, okay, the thing that I said before is not working, and be very sort of thoughtful and convince organizations about it and move on. And I think that is critical, right? So I recommend every quarter or so sort of rethinking, is everything that I had there, do I still believe this? Do I think this works? And revisiting, is your strategy still on track? So I went through 10 tips fairly quickly. All of this is a lot harder than it sounds, right? So I said, really, there's like 2 questions that will give you your product strategy, which is, what is the game I'm playing and why will I win and how am I keeping score? Or, how will I build things that delight customers in hard to copy profit enhancing ways, right? These are just 2 questions, but it's really hard to get to it because it involves understanding your competencies, your market, your competition, your consumers, more than anyone else, and then sort of integrating all of this into a plan that is, ideally in its finished form, about 1.5 to 2.5 pages long. But I think getting to that is doing that and doing that well will sort of help you and your company and your team more than anything else. So there are 3 takeaways that I hope you sort of go away with, which is, the first is that there is far more bad strategy than good strategy. And so recognize it, right? Which is, and you don't have to feel embarrassed about it or bad about it or any of that sort, but find that like organizations have this natural tendency to get there. Good strategy is simple, but hard to get to. So spend the time that it takes to get there, right? Like ask these questions, keep going deeper. And finally, keeping strategy on track is work, right? So focus on it, have a discipline on how you prioritize questions, but also then how often do you revisit what you have so that you can go back and sort of tweak things as they come along. With that, I do want to close with the final poll, which is, what was your biggest takeaway from today? What is the thing that resonated most with each of you? Was it there's more good strategy than bad strategy? Good strategy is simple, or that it requires discipline and iteration? Cool. All right, looks like most people are on the basket. With that, I'll say, oh, yeah, I think the thing that always, the more I've thought about this, the thing that always surprises me is just how much bad strategy there is. And so that one is always is surprising to me. All right, thanks very much. With that, I would love to take questions.
Awesome. Right. Thank you so much for those 10 tips. I think they're very prescriptive. Clearly, they have come from experience, sharing those learnings with us. There are several questions, so I'll try to again combine and paraphrase it. So Vijay is asking two things. One is, you said there's a lot more bad strategy than good strategy. Is there a point where you actually know that your strategy is going bad? And the second part of that question is, how often do you evaluate the strategy?
Yeah, so I'll answer the second question, which is I think you should evaluate your strategy every quarter, right? So for me, it's about, I think 3 months is a good time to check in. And I think you evaluate your strategy. You evaluate, do I still believe all the things I said were true when I started on this project? I think the first part, which is so the first question is roughly like, how do you know you have bad strategy, right? That was roughly the question. Yeah. So the question is, so it's roughly this. Like, I think the first time you should, I think does, when you read your document or when you hear it, right? Do you actually understand like what the game you're playing is and how you will win? I find that when you read more strategy things, right, like they sound great. And if you have a very charismatic leader or an org, you will actually convince yourself for a second that like, this works. And then when you come back, I by the way, I've had this, experience where I was working with this very, just very charismatic exec. And I had questions. And so, he called me in and we chatted for half an hour. And at the end of it, the 20 minutes, I left the room saying, oh, wow, this is going to be amazing. We're going to win the market. It's going to be great. Then I went and sat at my desk and I was like, wait, let me think about this again. And I was like, oh, this actually, this won't work for this and this reason. And so I think looking at any strategy and asking these questions, is this customer delighting? Is it hard to copy? Is it margin enhancing? Will this actually make us win in whatever game we're playing? And I find most times, you'll find that most things don't meet that bar.
So I suppose you evaluate it frequently and you use the score to know when that strategy is not working or going bad, and then you reevaluate that or redefine that in a way.
And I think like, almost day to day, you should be looking at metrics. So metrics will tell you, okay, is I believe these things, and if I believe these things, this number should have moved, right? DAU should have moved, or some underlying metrics tied to it, retention, or like how many customers you onboard. Like some of those numbers should have moved. If after a while none of them are moving, something in your assumptions is wrong. Yeah. And again, it could be execution, right? Like your idea could be great, but the execution is off. Or it could be that you were looking at the wrong place and some of your assumptions were wrong. And so I think reevaluating that on a quarterly basis makes.
Yeah, I think that is important. I mean, some may choose quarterly, some may choose slightly lesser, but I think, the key is not to do it every day and decide, oh my God, the metrics are not moving, so our strategy is wrong, right?
So absolutely don't do it every day.
Yeah, Aishwarya, I hope that answers your question, because you said, she was asking, how do you keep modifying your strategy as and metrics change, but, give it some time for that to actually, get you more realistic results.
Yeah, and by the way, good strategy should last you years, right? Which is, for example, for the team that I lead on search, someone new joined my team, and he sort of said, oh, I was tweaking our strategy deck, and he said, oh, but this is almost like, this is exactly the strategy that you wrote 3 years ago. And I was like, no, that's a feature, that's not a bug, right? Like it kind of says like, okay, this makes sense. Yeah. So don't feel like you need to change it every.
But you also mentioned that every feature, or mostly, should answer these questions, right? Does this delight the customer? Is it hard to copy? And sometimes is it margin enhancing ways? Now the question from Rohit is, and especially around startups. So you worked in some startups, so
Yes.
we can do that. Is let's say the startup survives early period and gets to series of MVPs, and then you get some traction. And at what point should you start asking this question? Is this easy to copy? Right? If at some point there are other either incumbents or upstarts that are starting to look at and doing this, right?
Yeah. It's other. So I think you should always. A lot of things are easy. So actually, when I've talked to startups, right, the question is more than other startups or the competitors. They're like, oh, some large company, Google, Facebook, etc., is going to copy my feature, and then I go away. Yeah. So AI, I actually, for startups, right, speed is a huge advantage, right? And so what I generally tell people is most people overestimate how easy it is for like a large competitor to copy a startup. Speed is actually an advantage. I do think, on the other hand, so there are times when I think so your advantage simply cannot be that you were there first, right? And you can kind of say, look, network effects are important. So over time, the network effect is what matters. Or there's something in my execution or the user community I create that matters. For example, I was having this discussion with someone yesterday, and they were talking about Twitter Spaces and Clubhouse, right? Which is they're both audio sort of products. They're both audio social products. Why shouldn't Twitter, which has an established graph, actually just take everything from Clubhouse right away? But the reality is, even though the gap is about, I think Clubhouse has been around for like a year longer, there is enough of a community that has been created and a dynamic that they've created that is very hard for Twitter Spaces to copy. And Twitter is locked into their existing graph. So creating a new graph is really hard, right? So I think you should be aware of what competition is doing, but don't assume that purely copying the feature is sufficient. On the other hand, right, like I think if you're not building things that are very hard to copy, that is inherently a bug, right? So there has to be something, right, which is either you're creating customer lock-in, you're sort of creating this engagement, and that is what you're building, and then that is hard for someone to copy. If that's not there, that is absolutely a threat.
So I think it's not just about making that feature hard to copy, but you might have a different routes to market, you might have different customer segment, you might have a different partnership. So there are distinctive strengths that you need to build, the moats that you need to build.
Right. And I mean, and by the way, hard to copy is also, so for example, I mentioned Gibson, who writes hard to copy, who writes a blog. He talks about how it's brand, right? So brand is, it's really hard for anyone else to be Netflix because everyone knows what Netflix is. So all of these things are part of what is hard to copy.
Defensible modes. Yeah, absolutely. So anytime there is a mention of metric, I'm sure you got this everywhere. There is a flurry of questions about metrics, right? So, and we talk about one metric, North Star metric, secondary metric, and all of that. But I'm trying to paraphrase the questions from Sagnik on LinkedIn and Manas and all of that. So essentially, what two things. One is, how do you resist the urge of different people in the organization saying, well, one metric is not enough, we need to have more, number one. The second thing is, how do you know, or how do you determine, is there a mechanism to determine what is the right metric for this product? Now, I'm sure that is different metrics for different stages, right? So how do you do that? Now, I mean, I know it's a long, I can imagine it could be a really long way of doing it, but if it's let's do it in a short way.
So let me try and answer it in a short way, but also say that there isn't a perfect answer to this, right? So I literally in January we had a review for one of the areas that I oversee, and it was with the with sort of the exec leading all of search, right? And I kept coming back to a single metric, and they kept trying to convince me, no, you don't need a single metric over here. And so this debate exists like at every single point in sort of product management.
Yeah.
I think a single metric is important, right? So I will say there is no perfect metric, right? So like I said, even with the YouTube example, there are perfectly good, reasonable arguments to pick views or creators or revenue versus watch time. But I think sort of saying on the margin, what do I care about most is really important. And the reason I think picking a single metric matters is especially if you are in a sort of distributed environment or you have a large team, picking that metric makes everyone's life easier, right? Which is, let's say you can make that decision, and if it's if your company is 5 people, all of you are sort of well connected, it's not surprising. If your company is 1,000 people, you do not know what decision like some other person is making, right? And it's very hard for them to have all of your context. On the other hand, right, if you say, is your decision increasing watch time? Is your decision increasing watch time more or like a little less? Yeah. They can drive all of the decisions. Now there are risks to this, right? Like you said, this is why check metrics are important. Sometimes things can go off track, but the value in having that clarity is huge. And so again, like you are trading off certain things, right? So if you think about like watch time versus views, right? Like essentially you see this trend on YouTube now where almost every video is long, right? Like videos have just kept getting longer. And it's because creators have learned this. So you sort of create weird incentives, and then you have to, I think it's completely, at some point you change your metric, right? So for example, it's very common for people to focus on growth and then switch to retention.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's a very common pattern.
You have different metrics at different stages of where your product is in. Your focus is on acquisition or retention or engagement or revenue or referral. So you keep changing those, metrics to focus on those, right?
Correct. And I think the metric you pick is saying this is the stage I'm at, and this is what my strategy is most important to my strategy right now.
Sure. Super. Awesome. So one final thing, any recommendation on a good book? Several questions around that on product strategy or
So let me. I will jump to there are tons. So there's a lot to read online. I will. So Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, and 7 Powers are good books, but like I would say, read the first few chapters of Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. I think that's a good place to be. All the people that I mentioned they all write online. I find if you don't have the patience to sit through a few books, I recommend, if you're going to follow one person, I'd say like follow Shreyas Doshi on Twitter. Yeah. And I think reading stuff from Gibson Biddle and Adam Nash's earlier first post, I think those are good places to start.
Super.
That's what I would recommend.
Those are good places to start. Well, thank you so much. Truly appreciate it. So the person who asked the best question today, not that, there are so many, sorry folks, we couldn't take all of these questions due to shortage of time, but let me quickly read through the names. Ghanshyam, Priyanka, Bala, Aishwarya, Prabhat, all of you, thank you so much for your questions. But the one that I think intrigued most and also got us enough clarity is from Rohit. So Rohit, congratulations for the Marshall Scholarship. And quickly, folks, there is a leaderboard. The leaderboard is fascinating. In fact, you can join this leaderboard, refer your friends to join this next sessions that are going to happen for the next 3 days or so, and then win points, and then of course win some awesome stuff due to that. And thank you, Satyajeet. But before you go, really quickly, wanted to show we'll come back to the community one in a second, Shama. Appreciate you taking time. This is a token of appreciation from the Institute of Product Leadership. Again, while this seems like a plain vanilla digital certificate, it is backed by NFT. No, I'm just kidding, right? I'm just kidding. No, no NFTs yet. But again, appreciate you taking your time and your
I appreciate the invitation. Yeah, no, I appreciate the invitation. Thank you for, and I enjoy this. So thank you very much for inviting me.
Very insightful session. Thanks a lot. Right. So before we close for the evening, I want to just a call to action to all the folks here. There's an amazing product community that is growing and thriving. It's called, community.productleadersforum.org. There is also a mobile app for it. You can download, join thousands of people already having interesting conversation. There are a lot of C-level executives there, including some highly curated content, courses, videos, and very active conversations on opportunities and careers. So do join it. It's free. One of the goal of organizing this festival is to build this community in the country, right? And it's very important that we grow together and learn and share together as community so that we build awesome products, not just for India, but globally, right? With that, thank you again, all of you. Over to you, Shama, for any final announcements.
Thank you, Satyajit, for delivering a brilliant session. And thank you, Mr. Vedam, for moderating the session so beautifully. And audience, of course, thank you for joining in. It was great interacting with you all. So do not forget to register for the keynote tomorrow with Rajiv Srivastava, the Director of Product Management at Google, and Neeraj Sani, Director and Head of Strategy and Insights at Facebook. So the timing is the same, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. I'll see you tomorrow at 8 p.m. and take a few minutes to share your feedback and let us know your experience with the sessions that we're having with this edition. Your feedback is critical for us to make improvements for the next round of the festival. So please go ahead and cast your votes. Once again, thank you all for joining us. See you tomorrow, same time. With that note, I end tonight's session. Happy learning and stay skilled. Have a great night.